You are watching Fight Feed. Let's talk about the situation at middleweight in the UFC. So right now we've got Dricus Du Plessis as the champ at middleweight in the UFC. Dricus was apparently supposed to fight Khamzat on June 28th at International Fight Week in Vegas. Apparently he's now injured, but it doesn't sound like there was ever a signed fight, which is typical for the UFC to kind of announce things, even though this was never announced, and not have signed contracts. Regardless, I want to talk about who is the deserving contender to actually fight Dricus next in the middleweight division. To start it off, let's just go off of merit, okay? So if we're looking at a meritocracy here, who is the most deserving? I have to say it would be Nassourdine Imavov. He has a KO over Israel Adesanya. He's also finished Jared Cannonier, although it was a bit of a contested finish because Jared was still on his feet. I think after watching Jared's last fight and seeing how he was able to survive that initial several knockdowns from RoboCop and then come back and win the fight, it begs the question of, did Nassourdine really KO him? But I think regardless, the way that fight was headed was definitely leaning heavily in favor of Imavov regardless of the early finish or not. Imavov was the only person who's ever been able to finish Izzy that soon in a UFC fight. Finish him at pretty much the start, middle of round 2 of that fight. I will say Israel looked great in the beginning. It was piecing him up, but Nassourdine landed that shot and then put him out. So you have to give him that opportunity if you're just going off of merit. Comparing his wins to Khamzat, it's really not even close because the only person Khamzat beat was Robert Whittaker, which is an absolutely amazing win. However, if you go on paper and compare, a win over Robert or a win over the guy who's beaten Robert several times, you would have to just say, obviously, that win over Israel puts Imavov ahead of anybody else in the middleweight division, in my opinion. Now, this is just a merit-based system if we're going off of that. Now, if we're going to go off of popularity or the ability to sell a fight, I do believe Khamzat is that next person in line. So because of his ability to sell the fight, he would actually override Imavov in this case, because I think although Imavov might have a big French audience, I don't think he's able to tap into the English audience as much. Now, someone like me, who's a big fan of MMA and UFC, of course I'm a fan of Imavov. He's a great fighter. He goes out there to finish people. He wants to hurt people in the cage. He's definitely got a side to him that is fun to watch in the octagon. So, but I'm just one person, and I feel like there's a lot of fans in the UFC who are very casual, and they're not tuning into every fight, right? So those casual fans are the ones who know about Khamzat. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, Khamzat definitely would be the next person in line from the ability to sell the fight, okay? So it sounds like the UFC's already made that decision that Khamzat is the next contender, although he only has one win over Robert Whittaker. The only other win he has in the middleweight division to even speak of, if you're talking true middleweights at this point, it would be Gerald Meerschaert, I think. And I don't even think he's ranked anymore. So he did beat Kamaru Usman, but it was on short notice, and we all know Kamaru is not a middleweight. He's always fought at welterweight, was the champ at welterweight. Not to say it's not a good win, but it's not something that I think you would look at as a bragging point for arguing a middleweight title shot. Now, if you're to argue him being at 170, perhaps, but he's not anymore. So we can take that out of the mix. With that said, you've got Khamzat right there to be able to sell a big fight. Him versus Dricus is a massive fight. It's a massive pay-per-view. Could be a main card pay-per-view event, and it could really be anywhere. I think no matter what, you're going to have UFC fans tuning in from around the world. Now, what's interesting in this situation is with Dricus potentially being out, and if the UFC should decide to do an interim belt, there's a lot of people saying, obviously, if there is to be an interim belt, why is Nassourdine Imavov not in that belt picture against a Khamzat. I think that's a great fight. I think that they could easily make that. And I think it would make sense. But what I will say is, although Caio Borralho doesn't have, he beat Jared Cannonier, and that's the highest ranked opposition he's had in the middleweight division. He does have 7 fights in the UFC, and he's 7-0. And also, I think people were bitching about him getting a shot. And I think what people don't realize is this is not something that the UFC is necessarily saying. Caio's just stepping in and trying to sell this fight. He's trying to sell the fight against Khamzat, and he's doing a great job. Because if you think about it, he is right there in the mix, and he could argue his way in, especially with the storyline of him and Khamzat previously training together. He's just selling himself. And I think that's where people are like getting upset about it. It's like you guys are getting upset for someone trying to sell their way into getting a big fight. And I think he has all of the bragging points. I mean, he's had some really fun UFC fights. He's finished several people in the middleweight division. It's not like he only has, one or two wins over scrubs in the middleweight division. Beating Jared Cannonier is a pretty big deal. And I think if you want to argue, Imavov finished Cannonier, realistically, Caio basically finished him too. Like in that last round, he had Jared on the ground hurt badly and knocked him down several times. And, if you just put Jason Herzog in there with the same intention that he had against Imavov, that fight would have been stopped as well. So I think that you could really argue either way that both of them really dominated Jared Cannonier from that perspective. So I feel like he is doing everything right in terms of trying to sell this fight and potentially get that interim crack against Khamzat. Now, I don't think that there should be an interim belt. Dricus just fucking fought in February, and they should not be putting his belt up as an interim belt. I mean, the guy's defended now against Sean Strickland and against Israel, and he beat Israel by submission. So, Dricus has proved himself in this division, and he should be able to take some time if he got injured, especially considering the fact that Khamzat has pulled out of how many fucking fights? Like, are we really going to sit here and act like Dricus pulling out of one fight is this horrible thing when Khamzat's literally pulled out of every single fight he's had booked in the last 3 years? He's either pulled out or it had to get canceled and then rescheduled. He continuously pulls out of fights. So let's not sit here and act like Dricus did something so far left. And Khamzat's fucking delusional when he posts that this guy's bullshit. Bro, you literally pulled out of more fights than you fought in the last 3 years. So it's you need to chill out. But yeah, I think that if you're looking at it from that perspective, I feel like Khamzat definitely deserves that crack just based off of the selling point. It's going to sell a lot more. But I think right after that, you have Imavov, who's absolutely deserving of a title shot. Now, will the UFC give him that title shot, or will they make him defend his number one spot in the middleweight division? That's what we'll have to see. But in my opinion, a middleweight bout, interim belt between Khamzat and Caio would be a great fight, and I think even Khamzat versus Imavov would be a great fight. And I have no problems with Caio Borralho selling his way into this. And also, you guys have to remember, he's picking up the steam off of his team. Being part of the Fighting Nerds and actually one of the founding members of the Fighting Nerds, he is able to sell not only himself just with his performances, but also the Fighting Nerds as a team has such a buzz around it right now, especially with Gene Silva just fighting last weekend or 2 weekends ago and beating Bryce Mitchell, and now you've got Carlos Prates coming up this weekend. They've got a lot of steam behind them, and they're undefeated in the UFC. So that in and of itself is just going to help Caio continue to sell his position in potentially getting a crack at an interim belt, should that interim belt be created for this occasion. Yeah, in my opinion, I'm not upset about it one way or the other. I think no matter what, any of these bouts are pretty big at middleweight, especially for those who are diehard fans. Those who don't know Imavov, that's their own problem. Go watch Imavov's fights. He's definitely a very fun fighter to watch. He's not in there to play, patty cake. He wants to fucking hurt people. So him versus Khamzat would be fun. And I think Khamzat, although I've had issues just with how he carries himself sometimes, like in terms of, him not realizing, like he's like doesn't see the forest through the trees with his whole like bitching about Dricus pulling out when he's pulled out of so many fights. And Dricus already smoked him with a comeback on that, and Khamzat stayed quiet, probably because hopefully he realizes that he has no leg to stand on when it comes to bitching about pulling out of fights. But he's a killer. When he gets in there, he is literally trying to kill him. So these are fun matchups. I think no matter what, you're going to have a banger fight between, Dricus, Khamzat. And I think Dricus' style is perfect against any of these guys. Like, none of these guys are the type to kind of lay and pray. Everyone would go out there and really try to finish one another. And so I think no matter what, in these potential middleweight matchups, you've got banger fights through and through. Comment below, let me know what you guys think about this situation. Make sure you subscribe to Fight Feed for all my MMA content, and give this video a like if you feel so inclined. I'll see you guys soon.